I am an extremely passionate and committed human services professional who possesses an in-depth working knowledge of the psychological and sociological aspects of human development. I consider myself to be a cognitive behavioral specialist, believing that making a change in how one thinks brings about a change in what one does. Many shy away from therapy because they feel their situations are either unique or they are fearful, embarrassed, or ashamed to let others know they need help. SciSpot is my way of corralling pertinent personal, professional, and academic information on understanding human development in one place for all to access privately and even share with others. My personal mission statement is, I am driven by divine precepts and an undying passion to facilitate change in the lives of others. What's yours? Let SciSpot guide you through your healing and provide you with many other ways of becoming better today than you were yesterday. Come on in and join me.
And good morning all. Welcome to SciSpot Live. I'm your host as always, Sabir Aline, and once again, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Welcome all to the show. So today we're going to be talking about effective communication. And one of the things that I'm going to always take you back to, because see, this is one of the problems we often do. We don't go back to the list of our stuff so we can see where our stuff presents itself in our relationships with others, right? Be it a relationship with a significant other, a family member, a friend, little homie down the way, your job, whatever it is, right? Whatever that relationship is, we have to take a look at all of our relationships, because as much as we curtail certain behaviors around others, right? Because there's some behaviors you have around your family, some behaviors you have around your friends, and so on and so forth. Although we try to make every effort to curtail certain behaviors, who you are is who you are. And it's just a matter of time before who you are shows up. You know, it's one of those hot mic moments. It's one of those moments where, you know, you get caught saying something that you really didn't mean to say in front of them folk, right? And now they're looking at you sideways. Well, they've always been doing it, but now they're really looking at you sideways and questioning the legitimacy of you, the authentication of you, right? Because we all often talk about being authentic, being real. This is real rap, right? You know, and what happens is you start finding out how real you're not being with yourself. Because it's easy to put on false airs for other people and, you know, try to lead people to see you in a different light. But who you are is who you are, right? You can hide but for so long, and the truth comes out. See, I do these shows live, right? So anything that comes out of my mouth, I stand by. I stand by. Not only do I stand by it, I live by it. Why? Because so many people know who I am from interactions business-wise, personally, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows me unless you have had a lengthy relationship with me, right? So if you've not invested time in coming to understand who I am, you know, you don't know me. You know what you see before you, but you don't know where I come from, right? But in many ways, where we come from is shown to others through how we communicate. So I'm going to always take you back to the show on childhood trauma, right? And an understanding what trauma is, right? And trauma is not just loss. Trauma is just not witnessing, you know, horrific events. Trauma is anything that is significant to the individual. And that could be something as small as my siblings got cookies and I didn't. Even though I was bad, even though I was on punishment for something that I was told that I did wrong. A child doesn't understand, right, what wrong is until you tell them, and they become conditioned to understand and believe that what you're telling them that they did was wrong. But the human being in itself is created totally self-centered. You have to understand this part. The human being is created totally self-centered, right? The human being was given free will, right? That means the ability to make choices, to make decisions, right? Based on its own perception and understanding of the world around it. But that small part within the person, the id, that's ID, that small part of that person that never changes, the part of that person that is there from the, as soon as that spark, those 23 chromosomes from each parent connects, bam, it's there. That first spark of life, the id is there. It's unwavering. The id wants what it wants, and it wants it now. At any cost. At any cost. The process of maturity, the process of human development and growth, right, should entail increased morality, right? Should entail management of one's own conduct, which is where the ego comes in, right? Becoming more conscious of others, right? Becoming more accepting that others have shortcomings, and it's not for you to judge, right? And judgment is a part of that. The morality, which is that super ego, is your convictions. Your convictions, right? And some people's convictions are grounded in their trauma, not spirituality. And we have to understand this. See, when you start looking at like your morality and what you think is the right thing, right? Where does that come from? Where does that come from? This is what you have to begin to understand. So when people say that, you hear people say things like, you know, people are acting hedonistic, you know, you're heathens. You know, we should remember, what is the show with the junk people, Sanford and Son. You know, the aunt, Aunt Esther, who, you know, was a church-going person, you know, holy roller kind of person, and she would see the behaviors of Fred and Lamont, and she would, you know, call them heathens. You're heathens because of the conduct that was unbecoming to her. Not unbecoming to them, but unbecoming to her, with her condition. So her condition, right, is much different than theirs. Sure, they got dressed and they went to church, they did their thing. She was in the church. She was, you know, like wrapped up in it. She spoke the word, and that's how that was her worldview. So because that was her worldview, her communication was grounded in all of that. So every time she spoke, she attempted to speak from those convictions. When you look at childhood trauma and you look at all the things that happened along the way, depending on how you mature as a person, right, will greatly affect how you communicate. Because if you have not matured in the areas of the ego and the superego, then you will continue to run off of the id and continue to do and say hurtful things to other people. Not necessarily saying that it was intentional, right? Because consciously and unconsciously we do things. We just don't know it. That unconsciously get it. So what begins to happen is, right, even though we may unconsciously do something or say something to somebody, it still has an effect on the other person. And because it has an effect on the other person, we have to make a choice to either look at it for what it really is, from what the person is telling us about the behavior that presented to them, or we can just blame the other person. We can just, make the other person, the victim. I mean, we can take the victim role and we can say that the other person is wrong, right? Because oftentimes when people don't want to take responsibility, that's the role they take, the victim role. You were wrong, not me. You took it that way. You chose to look at it that way. Well, everything that I do is not always by choice. It's not always by choice. Sometimes it's part of my conditioning. Sometimes it's an impulsive reaction from within, and it comes out. It may come out in tears. It may come out in anger. It may come out, aggressively. It may come out passive. It may come out with humility. It may not come out with humility, right? So when we talk about effective communication, the first thing we have to do is not look at the situation that's happening before us, but look at the situation that happened before us in this condition. You follow me? So as a child, that was then. That was before. Right? As an adult, right? This is where I am right now. So this is what's before me. But I have to look at what happened before in order for me to understand why it is that I keep finding myself in certain circumstances, why it is that I keep finding myself in these situations of conflict and confrontation, of relationship loss, of ongoing difficulty. Why is it do I continue to find myself in that situation? Right? Now, in last week's show, the show on codependence, right? I talked about my codependent traits. Right? I'm a caretaker. I'm a people pleaser. Right? That's what I am. And as difficult as it is to swallow being, being made aware of your own codependent behaviors, because it's difficult to say, oh, I'm codependent? Wow. Really? You got to really look at that. Like, what does that mean? And when you hear it from other venues, most venues, when you hear about codependence, it's a very negative attachment to it, right? But being human beings, right? We need. That's part of our creation. We need. I want you to think about it for a minute. And I always go back to man's creation. Just think about Adam being in the garden alone. Why did God, in his infinite wisdom, give him Eve? What was happening with Adam's condition? Right? He was the only one like him. There were none others like him. There were all kind of animals and everything else around him, but there were none like him. There was something about that existence that God gave him Eve. Right? Got to understand that. And whatever doctrine you follow, you follow. But that's a reality. Right? For me, there was one, then there were two. Right? So when you look at all of the conditioning that happens as a result of that existence, right? Because the one, you couldn't remove that from Adam's condition. You couldn't say, okay, well, God can do what he wanted to do. But once Adam's existence was shown to all other creatures, right? We know the conflict began then, right? Conflict began then. Man has always been at odds, and creatures have always been at odds in some capacity. Just for your edification. It's always been in existence. So, violence within the family members and those kind of, the family, that's not new. It's not new, right? So we have to look at, when we talk about communication, we have to understand the human being. We have to understand the human being. We have to understand our own humanness. Our humanness are not our cars, our homes, our money, things. Materialism is not our humanness. And we lose sight of our humanness because we get caught up in those things. And when we have all these things, we feel a sense of accomplishment, achievement, because we have things. Forgetting that we're still not dealing with the things within us that are deep down in the crevices of our mind from our childhood and things that happened along the way. Right? Like Little Red Riding Hood, there's a lot of things that happen on the way to grandmother's house. Right? So here we are adults, and here we find ourselves in numerous situations where communication continues to be an issue, right? And one of the things that you'll hear over and over again, right, is that men are not good communicators. That men don't talk about their feelings. Men don't do that, right? That's what you will hear over and over and over again, which goes back to, I talked about Adam and Eve. Eve told Adam her purpose. You can go research that for yourself, but she told him her purpose, right? So there's some legitimacy to that statement, but it also has to do with conditioning. Remember, I talked about conditioning of the ego and the superego, right? So that ego, that's the part, the nurturing, the part that needs to be nurtured. That's the part that you have to latch on to as a parent, as a caretaker, as a partner, as a friend. You have to nurture that part of the person. And that person gets this nurturing, and they begin to see that it's okay or not okay to do certain things. And when it comes to communication, it has to be encouraged of males, especially, to talk about their feelings, right? Because you ask a man about a particular thing, you know, how he feels about a particular thing, he'll typically tell you how he thinks about a particular thing, right? He'll pretty much, you know, oh, nah, I feel hurt, I feel sad, I'm good, no, I'm alright, I don't feel nothing about it, it is what it is. You know, that's part of that conditioning that we continue to get. And I say continue because I still hear it in the air. When I'm out and about, I still hear it. I still hear it in the air. And that's why we have such violent interactions in the communities. Because there's nothing to talk about. Handle your business, right? Handle that. Handling it, for me, is having a conversation. Yo, what's up? Did I do something to offend you? Because it sure wasn't my intent. And if my behaviors, although unintended, brought about this kind of interaction between us, I need to fix that. Because I don't want that to be our kind of interaction. Right? Now, I'm not talking about going up on a corner, but listen, it can happen on a corner that way. But what I'm saying to you is, when we look at conditioning, right, of males, right, it's a difficult thing for males to be able to express emotion, so an environment has to be created. An environment has to be created. And I don't want to go into the list yet, because I'm getting ready to go into this list about this article, the 10 Commandments of Effective Communication. Y'all thought I was going to do biggies. Nah, not today. That's another show. But it's a matter of looking at what's effective, because we know what's ineffective in many cases. But in the cases where it's most important for you to understand what effective communication is, right, you don't. Somebody yelling and screaming at you, that's not effective. We know that. That's ineffective, right? Somebody calling you outside of your name, right? We know that's ineffective, right? Those are the obvious things, right? But then there's the things that are not so obvious. Things that you really don't see anything wrong with. Things that you feel are, it ain't that deep. But the other person, the recipient of this trait, this less endearing trait, right, that you're exhibiting, right, the recipient is just as important in the situation as you. Just as important as you. That means being listened to, being heard, being understood. All of those things are significant to the other person. Because I'm not just going to open my mouth and say something unless I want you to hear me. And at some point in time, people begin to shut down in some cases and stop talking, stop communicating, because they've tried. I'm a great communicator. I will ask, I will talk about any and everything. Sometimes, to my detriment, I may over-talk something and just have to say, okay, babe, I got it. You know? But don't be offended. Well, why I don't intend to do it. I'm a lecturer, right? That's what I do. I lecture, right? I do workshops. I do things of that nature. So sometimes I can, get a little flow going, because once I'm going, I'm going. It's nothing towards you, and it's no judgment should be placed upon me for being who I am. That's my craft. That's my craft. That's what I do. And knowing that, right? You shouldn't take the position of, listen, I don't need to be lectured by you. I'm not intending to lecture you. That's who I am. I'm passionate about a matter, and I do that. So just tell me, babe, okay, I got it. And I'm good with that. I'm good with accepting that. But you won't know that if you don't ask me and if I don't tell you. But if I tell you something ahead of time, how do you internalize that? If I tell you that I tend to sometimes be a little lengthy, when I'm having dialogue about things, feel free to stop me. So now you go into your zone, right? You go into the crevices of your own thinking and existence and say, hey, well, I remember this happened before. And, your father, your ex used to do the same thing. A teacher used to do the same thing, and it just wore you out because you just didn't have the ability to retain all of that coming at the same time. Or you had already shut down, right? Again, that's yours, not mine. But it's mine because I have to look at how it affects you. Right? So let's go to this list of effective communication. And again, this show is live on Facebook, it's live on Twitter, and I also record the show and I post it on my Daddy's Right Here YouTube educational station. So anytime you want to revisit any show that I do, you can always find it on my Daddy's Right Here YouTube educational station. Well, most of the time you can, unless I do something stupid like I don't cut the other camera on. So I'm actually looking at 3 cameras at the same time, right? Because I want to make sure that you get this information. And when I do these shows, understand one thing. I'm not just doing this for you. This is for me too. This helps me. This helps me speak into existence the things that I need to continue to work on as a person so I can keep growing. Because at 57, almost 58 years old, I'm still growing. I'm still growing. So let me go to the article. The article can be found at inc.com. That's inc.com. The title of the article is The 10 Commandments of Effective Communication, and it's an article by Justin Bariso, founder of Insight. Founder of Insight. I haven't checked Insight out yet, but the name speaks volumes, right? Okay. So, to the article. Communication is the lifeblood of every relationship. The lifeblood. A lack of healthy communication causes marriages to fail, creates distance between parents and children, and can destroy the culture of any organization. That one statement, I can just say, thanks for joining me, good night. If you don't have healthy communication, right, it's a wrap. It's been a wrap. If you are arguing with your partner regularly, right, right? Look at the content of the arguments and ask yourself, will there ever be any resolve to what we are arguing about? If you're always arguing and that has become your method of communication, that is an unhealthy relationship. And, you hear people say drama, breeds drama. Well, it does, right? Because even if you're not a person who is drama driven and the other person is, it's just a matter of time before you get drawn in to that conditioning. That you find yourself in the same condition they are. Because you won't leave. You keep going back to it, right? You keep trying to modify your visits, the frequency of how often you're around that person, all these other kind of things. The same thing that people do when they want to stop any kind of other addiction. You got a problem with cocaine, so you start smoking weed and taking a drink so maybe you won't get as blasted. Or you're smoking, you're drinking too much, you take some cocaine and cane or some uppers and all kind of other things. Or you go eat ice cream when you're having a stressful moment and you find yourself gaining all this weight. It's always something. But when you're in a toxic, here's that word again, a toxic relationship, right, which is very unhealthy, right, there's a multitude of things that come along with it. That come with it, right? So if communication is the lifeblood of every relationship, and we know the necessity that blood is to the human body, you need to take a look at that. Right? Back to the article. Effective communication involves not only hearing what others say, but understanding them, and vice versa. But this is easier said than done. And then as individuals, we each have a unique worldview, influenced by the way we are raised, our personal experiences, and our environment. Further, we communicate with the benefit of knowing our own motives and intentions, while the recipients of our message don't have that luxury. Don't have that luxury. Let me read that last sentence again. Further, we communicate with the benefit of knowing our own motives and intentions, while the recipients of our message don't have that luxury. We know what our intentions are when we say things. We know. We know. We may not, listen, even if we respond or react to a situation, because react and respond are two different things, we know that there's a feeling, right, that comes up. We know that there's a thought that happens before we open our mouths. We may not always know the core. We may not know where it has come up from, but it has come up from somewhere, right? We do. And a lot of times people will sit there and they'll play that role. Let me tell you something. When somebody, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves and a serious qualm for me, right, that if somebody says something to you out of their mouth, right, I mean, they know they just said something in defense of a thought or feeling that they had. They know it. And when they're called on it, turn around and justify it. That's an issue for me. Because what that says is, in a relationship, if I challenge you on a behavior that you just presented, and you reject the idea that you did anything wrong, well, you know that you sat there, and that's what was that's what happened, right? Listen, it causes the environment to change, because the trust is gone. Because now you find that you're in this relationship with this person, right, that you really don't want to be in, and that it's going to go downhill from there, because this relationships are about growing together. They're about growing together, right? So if you can't be honest about your own stuff that's being presented right here in this situation, especially when you're called on it, and you stand to lose a good partner, and you don't do anything about it, that's not that's not acceptable. You would actually watch your wife, your husband, walk out of the door because you want to hold on to that stuff. But you blame them for walking because you want them to just stick with it and let you keep doing it. Right? Because you're going to keep doing it because it's not going to change. You're going to keep doing it. It's going to keep resurfacing over and over and over again. And you do one or two things. You either accept it and allow it to continue to happen and just take it on the chin every time it happens. Well, while in the meantime, that other person thinks it's okay, right? Or you're just going to walk. Or you're going to walk. At what cost do you continue to accept that level of communication? At what cost? Right? Because we talked about that in the last show on codependence. At what cost? Right? So you have to look at, I know that I had some feelings about it. I know that I just reacted in a particular way. And if you call me on it and I tell you what I felt, right? Are you willing to accept it? That's key, because in here it talks about vice versa. Effective communication involves not only hearing what others say, but understanding them. Yeah, I heard you. No, you didn't hear me. You weren't even listening to me. How do you know somebody's listening? Eye contact. When you're talking to somebody, somebody's looking away, right? It doesn't always mean that they're being disrespectful. Sometimes shame, guilt, embarrassment is part of that. Sometimes I'm shutting down because I'm having feelings about why my behaviors continue to show up like this. Why do I keep doing this? Or maybe I'm just shutting down because, you know what? I listen to you. I hear you. But whenever it's me, you never hear me. You never hear me, but because the person has never expressed that. Again, effective communication. You see it as disrespecting you. This whole communication thing, it's really deep because, you know, at the end of the day, you always find out it begins and ends with you. No matter what the situation, it begins and ends with you. Back to the article. So how can we do better? Better communication is one of the topics that I don't want to read that because it's promoting a book, and I ain't getting no cha-ching going off and promoting somebody's book. The article, I'm referencing the article because of somebody else. I ain't promoting nobody's book. Alright, but anywho, the first thing on that list, thou shalt listen first. Number one, thou shalt listen first. To communicate in a way that others understand, you have to learn what's on their minds first. That's why listening is so important. Active listening involves asking questions along with concentrated effort to understand your partner's answers, all while resisting the urge to judge. When you regularly and skillfully listen to others, you stay in touch with their reality. You become quickly aware of the other person's highs and lows and how they are dealing with them. Further, you send a message that what's important to them is important to you. You send the message that what's important to them is important to you. Your opinion then carries more weight because it's based on reality, your partner's reality. Okay? So when you look at relationships growing and us building together, and again I keep going back to trauma, childhood trauma, right? Because there's always a conversation on a failed relationship, a bad relationship. Those conversations always come up. What people do is they use those as crutches to avoid their reality of other things that have happened. There are a lot of people, man, who, and you see a lot of it in the news, right, with events that are happening with these allegations of sexual inappropriateness, right, in the workplace, in Hollywood, in film, in sports. You see all these things, man, and it happens every day. It happens every day, right? But, and then that kind of made me think about, sexual abuse upon males. That's a whole show. It's probably going to be a couple of shows I'm going to do on that, because, males experience sexual assaults and sexual harassment, as well. And that's not something that's talked about, right? Because again, it goes back to the male conditioning. We take it on the chin. You get an attaboy for your actions, but when you start looking at asking questions, it talks here about, involves asking questions. Some people aren't that good with expressing themselves, right? I'm a talker, I'm a communicator, I'm quick-witted. Not quick with it, but quick-witted, W-I-T-T-E-D. That means I can think just like that. Everybody can't do that. For me, right, that is one of my shortcomings in dialogue, because I can think so fast, because I'm quick in responding to certain things, because I internalize some things pretty well. People make the assumption that I understand what they're saying. Right? I hear you. I hear the words, right? But part of effective listening is also learning your reality. That's how you communicate. I don't know why you're quiet. I don't know why you stopped talking. I don't know why all of a sudden in the middle of a conversation, because it was a conversation, that you got angry and you started reacting. I don't know why, if you don't tell me. Right? And the first thing people tend to do when they're telling somebody something is to blame that person. Well, you said such and such, you said such and such about me. Hold on. Did you just display that behavior? Well, yeah, but... and this is how I problem solve. Now, that's my way of problem solving. If you just did that, how was I supposed to know why you got angry? Well, why would you even say something like that? Say something like what? That that I act like I don't care. Well, because that's how I see it. So you go through that whole gamut of why, and then, why, you keep going through all the whys, and then you get to the what. So you got to go through all the why this, why that, why not, why the da, then you get to what. What is this really all about? What is this really all about? For me, that's how I problem solve. Everybody doesn't problem solve like that. Because all I want to know is, like, well, why did you just say that to me? That's all the answer I want. I don't care about nothing else. And again, that's not effective communication. Right? That's not you learning about my reality. Right? As I talked, about it a few minutes ago. I'm a lecturer. I'm a workshop person. I do trainings. That's what I am. That's what I do. Right? That's what I do. So, it's to my detriment at times, but if we go somewhere and you say, well, babe, why don't you talk to them about such and such? You want me to go. Well, go ahead. That's what you do, babe. Go ahead. That's my pull. Tell them. But then when I do it when we're in a conversation, now it's a negative. Right? So I got to find the balance. I've got to find the balance in that. But you have to help me find the balance. Beating me upside the head, talking about, you're lecturing me, you're talking to me like I'm... No, that's coming from another place. That's coming from another place, right? With what's coming out of your mouth. That's coming from another place. Number 2 on that list. Thou shalt show empathy. When others tell you their story, endeavor to understand their thought process and see the world from their perspective. This is called cognitive empathy, right? This cognitive is the thinking, right? So that means that you need to understand. You don't understand through emotion, right? You understand cognitively in this aspect here, right? So you listen to them, you hear what it is that they're saying. You're trying to understand, right? You're trying to understand, right? And listen, this is important when you start dating someone, right? Because this is the part, like I always talk about asking the right questions, right? Because, when you meet a person, you get their representative. I don't care how real, a person says they are. I'm not going to give you all of me necessarily in the interview. I'm going to duck and dodge some kind of things. I'm going to bob and weave with some of the things, because I'm not ready to give you that yet. But over time, now I'm going to ask some direct stuff probably, that will probably make you uncomfortable. But that's who I am. But the other side to it is, you get a representative, and at some point in time, the representative should leave if this is a real situation. If it's not real, y'all going to keep being faced with a representative, and both of you will continue to be representatives until you have sex. And then when you have sex changes everything, because like I'm still being a representative in the person, but we just having sex. Now sex confuses everything, because now those things that you should have asked, that you would have asked, you won't ask right now, because this other thing got me going on, right? This other thing that got me caught up. I'm caught up in that. So now you start turning a blind eye to even more things that you turned a blind eye to when we met. You following me here? So you start looking at things from the perspective of understanding their thought process. You don't. The thinking is distorted now. The thinking is distorted when sex comes into play, because now the conflict is here in your heart and here in your head. So you lost sight of the cognitive relationship, right? When it talks about here cognitive empathy, the ability to understand that person's position. My problem has been being too damn understanding of one's circumstance. And then I go into caretaker mode. I go into codependent mode. I go into control mode. And we're going to talk about control, because control is another one of those aspects of a person that that is misinterpreted. Because anytime you enter into a relationship and you want to take a person away from a condition that they're in, whether you're taking them physically away from that condition, whether you're attempting to take them emotionally from that condition, spiritually from that condition, that is not your place. That is not our place. That's a boundaries issue. That's one of my challenges. That's one of the things that I'm challenging myself to improve with, because I enter into that and I want to bring happiness and joy, right? But if you're not a happy and joyful person, right, already, not just in the moment, real in yourself, in your existence, I can't give that to you. I can't give that to you. And that's a mistake that I've made over and over and over and over and over again, right? And in the meantime, I lose me over and over and over and over and over again. You know what it's like to go find yourself over and over and over and over again? That's work. And it's unnecessary work. So, it says here, sometimes you'll think, and this is the article, well, that's not such a big deal. I wouldn't feel the same way if I faced those circumstances. When this happens, try to think of a time when you did feel like your partner, right? This is called affective or emotional empathy. Then think of what might help you in that scenario, or even better, what would help your partner based on what you know about them. So you're having some difficulty in a situation, and listen, well, it is what it is a response that many of us give to situations. But it's not, it isn't what it is to everybody, right? It isn't. So that means that you have to go to that place where that person is, their reality, because if you're developing a relationship and you're trying to understand their reality, right, then you understand why they are feeling the way they do in a situation. Now you put yourself there. Well, when that happened to me, right, and you're doing all of this in the moment, right, because it's a here and now reaction. When that happened to me, where was I? How did I deal with that thing? Because we always talk about aftermath, the arrival. We don't talk about, the entrance to the pain, to the difficulty, the circumstance. We've arrived now. Oh, so we don't think that way anymore because I know now. But there was a time that you weren't always there. There was a time when you didn't know, right? Think about that time. How was it for you? It's a matter of, yeah. It was a heavy piece when, when it happened for me. And so I understand. This is a struggle. I don't understand what your struggle is, but I understand the struggle because of my own. Right? So now you're beginning to identify. Now you're showing the person that you understand. Right? And because you understand the behavior, because you understand something that's being presented, don't mean that you accept it if it's negative, if it affects that relationship. But you're getting to the emotional empathy now when you're feeling it. So you're not just in your head cognitively, now you're in your heart, you're in your gut, you're in your belly, you feel that. Right? So now you put your feelings with your thinking, and you come up with some kind of response to that situation that's going to be helpful. Number 3 on that list, thou shalt focus on the positive. Dwelling on the negative in others is a surefire way to breed contempt and close someone's ears to your own message. Therefore, focus on the positive in others by telling them what you appreciate about them. I appreciate you saying that, right? I appreciate you telling me that. I appreciate you, letting me know how you feel. I appreciate you, letting me in, because I know how difficult it is for you to let your guard down, right? That's been one of, the challenges that you've talked to me about. So again, I'm letting the person know I'm listening. I heard you say that was a challenge for you. So, in this interaction, so I realize it's a challenge for you, finding common ground, even if you disagree. Even if you disagree. Yeah. And I just said that a moment ago. Like, okay, listen, you understand where the person is because you have been through a circumstance much like that, and even though you deal with it differently or dealt with it differently, and you're in a different place, they're not in that same place, right? And even though you know a solution to something, you don't always have to tell that person that you know the solution, because again, it's their reality. You can't change another person's reality. They have to do that on their own. And the only thing you can do is share with them your reality and how you dealt with things, right? Maybe it'll work. When people start talking about, personal challenges and fear of counseling and rejecting the idea of counseling and not wanting to, have anybody telling them what to do. I share with them my own experience with counseling and how I got to the point in my life where, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. Why do I continue to have this inner gnawing? Why do I continue to have this inner gnawing? And I went to counseling, I went to counseling to work through those things, to find out what was happening, what do I need to do to improve with that, and how do I fix this, and how do I fix that. And I felt so relieved after doing it. One of the biggest things that sent me to counseling was dealing with the absence of my father in my childhood. And God bless him. He's just deceased now. He was murdered. But I didn't realize until I stopped running the streets. When I stopped, I began to see my reality and began to look at my future a lot differently, and looked at the things that had transpired. But the greatest thing for me was realizing that I missed my father. And people say, well, how can you miss someone that wasn't present? How can you not miss someone who contributed 23 chromosomes to your existence? It's natural. It's natural. That's a whole different discussion. So, laying this foundation, back to the article, first makes your partner more willing to hear dissenting or constructively critical opinions later. See, now is not the time to go into that. Right? But when you tell a person that you understand, when you empathize cognitively and emotionally with the person, right? This opens that door for the possibility of being able to offer that constructive criticism. Right? It opens the door. We're going to go to number 4. And we got 10 commandments to cover. But we're going to go to number 4, and then we're going to wrap it up, because we're about 10 minutes prior to the hour, and I just want to have some final parting words, on this particular matter. But listen, this is information that you can use if you choose to. You can pass it on to somebody else. Have some dialogue. I always tell people, listen, run these videos with just you and your partner. Just sit down and watch the video and have some dialogue. Run one of these videos, invite some people over and have some dialogue. You really want to get things going? Do that. Do that. Number 4, thou shalt be sincere. When praising, don't flatter or praise superficial qualities. Be genuine regarding what you appreciate about others. When sharing negative feedback, don't beat around the bush or water it down. Rather, communicate out of a desire to help. And that motive will become obvious to your partner. In addition, be willing to sincerely apologize. As the saying goes, apologizing doesn't always mean you're wrong and the other person is right. It just means that you value your relationship more than your ego. And it says ego here, but I'm total disagreement. It's not ego, it's id. Right? It's id. It's all about id. Right? So, my ego is that part of self that has the responsibility of managing the id, which is totally self-centered, and my morality, which is the superego. The ego is the one that tells the id, hold, stop, wait a minute. You don't need to say it like that. You're going to be offensive. You're going to hurt that person. You're going to lose that person. That's the role of the ego. So if you've not done any research, go to Sigmund Freud's page on I think it's on the psychosocial human development, right? And the stages of human development. And it'll tell you all the different stages, and it'll tell you, look for specifically the id, the ego, and the superego, and learn something about. People keep using that term egotistical, and it's wrong. So I disagree with that part, but it's not that deep, right? But you see how that can happen right now. That's not the kind of dialogue you would have with a person who, I'm saying in reference to the ego, but that's how it happens, right? It just pops out like that. So when you look at your being emotionally and cognitively empathetic towards the situation, last thing you want to go into, well, I don't agree with the ego, the ego concept and so on and so forth, because it's the id. Wrong. But I'm giving you that as an example because that's a perfect example, right? Because when you disagree in something, well, you know, well, I wouldn't have went that way. I wouldn't have did it that way, so on and so forth. Well, we ain't talking about you. We talking about me, right? But this is you understanding your partner. This is you understanding their reality. This is you learning their reality. Because that's how it has to be. You have to learn my reality. And if my reality is in conflict with yours and who you are and your ability to manage yourself, then you need to make a decision to move on and not impose your stuff upon me and become self-righteous and begin to turn me into you. Because I'm not you. I'm me. I'm me. And that's how unhealthiness kicks in, right? So we went over for today the article from Inc.com, that's INC.com, the article, The 10 Commandments of Effective Communication, written by Justin Bariso, right? We've been talking about the first four. In next week's show, next Sunday, we'll follow back up on this list of commandments. And again, don't get it confused with Biggie's 10 Commandments. But we will wrap up today with thou shalt be sincere. Just always listen. You know, and that's one of my issues again with my being a people pleaser and a caretaker. Like, I'm always apologetic. I'm apologetic for your stuff, right? You know, when I say apologetic for your stuff, it means that when you act out, right, on your less endearing traits, and I just suck it up and take it on the chin, knowing damn right, well, you're wrong, and then let you go ahead and you know, blast me, excuse me, and then later come back and apologize. You know, I'm apologizing not because you know, it's authentic. I'm apologizing because, one, I want you to like me. I want you to love me. I want you to stay with me. I don't want you to leave me. I don't want you to be angry with me. I don't want you to have a negative perspective of me. And you know, and so on and so forth. That's that people pleasing. That's that caretaker. That's that codependent stuff, right? That's that codependent stuff, right? That I was talking about last week. So I have to look at all those aspects of self, right? But I have to find the balance, right? Because I also am the one who will be genuine, right, about it, and I will say what it is. And, you know, it says when sharing negative feedback, don't beat around the bush. Don't water it down. You need to put it out there. And when I do that, I see that I don't get a good response because I say it as it is. And if a person is not ready to confront that, if a person has been avoiding confronting that aspect of self, or if that person has already begun to develop a perspective of you based on their own stuff, and they've made a negative view of you, you're not going to get a good reaction from that. So a lot of times I will avoid saying something because I don't want you to leave. You know, I don't want you to be mad at me. You know, I want you to love me. I want to love you. And if I do this, then you won't love me. And I need your love. And there's nothing wrong with needing someone's love. That's why you're with them. So these people who get caught up in, well, you know, you need to love yourself first, and, you know, this, that, and the other. I do love myself. I do love myself. My condition, right, has dictated my actions. I should be learning from my actions, and if I'm not learning from my actions, I'm allowing my actions to continue. And until the student, right, is ready to learn, the teacher will keep on putting it on the board. Right? You will continue to have those experiences until you are ready to do something different. But it's not for you to tell me when to be ready, because I'm not ready yet. Because I haven't processed, I haven't dealt with those things, because coping for me is not doing anything about it. And that's how I cope. So coping, so not doing anything is a coping skill if you don't know that. Right? But at the end of the day, it's a matter of, I'm looking at me, and I thank y'all for joining me, and I thank y'all for listening, and I thank y'all for helping me help myself so I can improve. as a person, because I'm not embarrassed by it. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to be a better person, right? At the end of the day, that's what I'm always seeking to be, a better person. And if you're not seeking to be a better person, if you're seeking to change others around you, well, listen, good luck. Because having been married 4 times, I can tell you, it don't work. It don't work. You can't take somebody from a condition where they are if they choose to be there. Period. And it doesn't make them a bad person, it doesn't make me a bad person. It just means that I have learned my lessons, I have seen things differently, I choose to do things differently.